Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order given the time. If you will, please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tony Turner, and I'm the chairman of the Central Middle School Building Committee, and I'll be facilitating most of the meeting this evening. I would like to point out a couple of things as we get the meeting underway. I want to be sure to point out that this meeting is for you. We would like to hear your feedback, ask your questions, and I'll talk a little more about that in just a moment. But at the end of the day, the building committee has been working extremely hard to deliver a 21st century school. And as you know, this is our third community engagement forum. We are getting tremendous feedback. A volume of feedback from a lot of people, and we would just ask that continue as we go through our meeting tonight. I would like to recognize a special group of people. Yesterday, we celebrated 1 year of since inception of the Central Middle School Building Committee coming together and having our first meeting. We've had almost 100 meetings since we started, sometimes 3 and 4 meetings a week when we're interviewing professionals and otherwise. And we have some committee members here this evening, some are online as well. But if you're in the room and you are a committee member, could I ask you to please stand and just be recognized? Please do that now. Good. Thank you. And Steph Cowie's in the back of the room. She is. I want to be sure to point her out as well. Steph, thank you. What I'd like to do now is to move right to the agenda. If we could pull that up. We're going to be talking about 4 things this evening. The overview of the project timeline. We're going to hear from our architect so that you can see the latest proposed site plan and design of the building. Of course, Q&A. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we hear from you and get your feedback. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about how you can stay informed going forward if you're not already. I mentioned several times questions. When you came in the door, let's go to the next slide, Jim. When you came in the door, you should have gotten a QR code on a piece of black and white paper that will allow you to, with your smartphone, hold your camera over the QR code, and it will bring up something called a Mentimeter. This will allow you to type in your questions so that we don't miss anything. And tonight, for the first time, we're going to take questions in 2 formats. The first format will be, as I just described, the Mentimeter. This will allow us to make sure that absolutely every question gets asked and answered. Our first community engagement forum, we had over 60 questions submitted. Our second forum, we had over 100 questions submitted. So the mandate for this crowd tonight is 150 questions. But seriously, we hope that you will feel free to use this methodology. And then likewise, we want to reserve the last 15 minutes or so to take live questions from the audience, and you could just come right up to the podium and we can hear from you there. Next slide, please. Just to recap, we've hired 3 professional firms to help us in this endeavor. First of all, Turner Construction, no relation. Turner Construction is our construction manager at risk. They have been on board with us since the beginning of the second quarter. Next is the SLAM Collaborative, and that team is sitting to my right, to your left. We have 3 executives from the architectural firm that's going to be presenting the site plan and the building design. And then to my immediate left is Jim Giuliano. Jim is the president of Construction Solutions Group. who is our owner's representative. And then I didn't introduce Tim. Tim Kleps on the very end is the project executive from Turner Construction. So we hope you will take advantage of having all of these professionals in the room. And again, if you prefer not to ask a question live, they are very involved in answering the questions that are submitted online. Just briefly, and I think this is a very important slide, is we want to update you on the timeline. You can see what we're going through now is design and approvals. We're approximately a year away for construction bidding and awards. The construction currently in the proposed timeline would begin in November of 2024. And we know several of you are neighbors. Many of you will have either do have students attending the school or will in the future. But we want to give you a sense of construction start date with a view that there will be move-in in the summer of 2026 with a full operational school year beginning in the fall of 2026. And with that, Jim, we're going to go to the next slide, and Slam can take over from here.
Thank you, Tony. So the first few slides that we have are a reminder for everyone of the visioning sessions and the programming that took place, the verification of the ed specs that took place in the beginning of this project back in January. And we were able to collect goals from all of the participants at the visioning session and combine the most heard goals into 3 goals for the project that encompass this first one that encompasses purposeful and resilient design. We want to make sure that this building is timeless in that it can be flexible enough to last for the next 50 years in the same way that this building did. We'll be looking at durable materials and also providing for those changes as they come in curriculum and pedagogy for teaching. The next vision is for fostering engaged learning. This one is really focused on the students. This is the goal of every school, but in particular, it shined through when we met with folks in your community and in your school district. Next one is sustainable actions. Another tenet of both the Greenwich community shining through and SLAM, our firm is dedicated to providing all buildings with the most efficient design possible. And so we are partnering with Greenwich to do that. Some fast facts about the school. You'll note that we're always looking back and comparing to the existing building only for the purpose of edification for you. We have worked very closely with the Board of Ed's ed spec. That requires a net square footage for program areas in the building at 81,005 net square feet. And the experience that we have as designers of schools tells us that an average middle school is built at an efficiency of 62.5% through 65% efficiency. That means that the support spaces, the corridors, the stairs and elevators, mechanical rooms, and bathrooms that support the program areas take up the additional 35% of the building. So 65% efficient is the target for this building. The 81,000 net square feet represents that. And the remaining portion of the building is the thickness of walls and the corridor system and the support spaces like mechanical rooms and bathrooms. So that explains that. And Jim's going to talk to you a little bit about the design intent for the building. Jim is the lead designer for the building, and Henry, to my immediate left, is the lead site designer or landscape architect at SLAM, and he'll be describing the site.
Yeah, Thank you. So we want to show a couple of the early sketches. And these are really just hand-drawn diagrams to try to understand the basic organization of the building. We ran through a number of different scenarios. I think this was option 8, and I think option 7 alone had option 7A, 7B, 7D. I think we got up through 7E. So the design team has been looking at all these permutations of the building organization and exactly how it fits on the site. Absolutely critical for Henry and I to work together, landscape and building kind of coming together. So I'll run through the building approach and scenario and design, and then I'll turn it over to Henry. But these diagrams begin to show you the massing and the basic organization of the building. The diagram on the left is really just a massing block where you can see the grades 6, 7, and 8. Those are the academic pods, which are at the back portion of the building. And then you can see where the gymnasium, auditorium, some of the specials fill a middle zone. And then that front zone, which is a 1-story element that faces the front door, the main entry, the after hours entry, and the main admin, the locker area, and some of the band rooms are out in the front. And then the diagram on the right is just a plan diagram that the design team had worked from. And you begin to see how the geometry of the site begins to influence the building and really how the building and site begin to marry up with each other. The last design review committee that we had, the building committee, we ran through a bunch of advantages. We talked about the plan development and where we were right now. This is just a bulleted list of many of the developments in plan and how the building has just gotten better each and every other week that we present. It's developed and become more and more clear. And I think we're in a really good place now that we're done with schematic design and awaiting some of the pricing that's going to come in. So I'll run through the floor plans. I think the last time we presented, I believe it was a 3-story building, and we received some feedback, and the design team is always reacting to the feedback. And based on conversations, this is a 2-story building now, and it's still pushed to the far north end of the site. We're actually taking advantage of the topography so that the academic pods exit the building at grade at the upper level. We're showing you the lower level right here. So this is the first floor plan, and you can see where it's labeled main entry. There's a big red arrow at the bottom portion there. That is the main entry to the school. All the students in the morning will come in, whether they're being dropped off by a parent or coming in off the bus. They will come in that front door. And you can see we've located the main office right there. So the main principal's office will be there, the receptionist, and that will be a secure entry. So and any visitor after hours or once the school day begins, those doors will be locked down. Visitors will come into the vestibule and have to check in at the main office, show ID, and then before they're allowed into the school. So that's really the checking point for any visitor that comes into the building. And backed up against that in the blue is the nurse's office. We tried to get that as close to the front door as we could, as well as some of the counseling offices. So all of those admin functions are grouped right at the front door for easy access. So any visitors that's coming in needs to do meetings will come right in, check in, and pretty much stay within that blue zone of spaces. You can see on the upper right corner, the spaces that are colored red and labeled wood shop and innovation. Those are some of the specialty spaces that we wanted to push out to the side of the building so that they're close to some of the delivery areas. There's some custodial receiving area. So there's a small area that the wood shop will make really easy for wood deliveries when supplies come into the building. And then the middle zone where you see the 2 main hallways kind of splaying away from each other. We've put the auditorium and the stage. Those are essentially windowless spaces. So we're able to kind of bury those in the middle of the building. And adjacent to that over on the left would be the gymnasium and the lockers for the students, as well as a fitness room on the corner, the OTPT room, which is mainly utilized by the special ed program, and all the gym offices. And then a little farther in the upper left corner of this is the cafeteria and kitchen. And then in the middle portion, you can see the space labeled courtyard. We were trying to get some natural light into the middle, the kind of the deepest part of the building. So we carved out a courtyard And we've moved some of the program around. So you see the FCS, which is the Family Consumer Science program, as well as the art room on the right-hand side of that courtyard, and the media center all have access to that courtyard. And the more important aspect would be driving natural light into each and every one of those spaces. So they have really good natural light and windows. So one of the basic premises that we heard from a planning standpoint early on was easy access for the community to come in. So we've kind of separated the main entry where you see the admin to the right-hand side, and the entry that you see to the left would be the main public entry. And anybody that comes in on that side would then have access to the gymnasium, the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the media center. So those are really the four primary spaces that want to be utilized by the cafeteria. So we've kind of sectioned that off and been able to control access and cut off access to the rest of the building for that after-hour use. But you can see the basic organization of the plan has been greatly simplified since over the last few months. And that really has helped some of the square footage reductions and basic organization of the building. Moving up one floor, so this is the second floor, and all of the academic spaces have been pushed up to the second floor. You can see the far right-hand pod would be 2 6th grade teams, the middle pod is 2 7th grade teams, and the far left pod is 2 8th grade teams. So as students enter the building on the first floor, they would traverse those long corridors and end up on the stairs. So you can see one stair here in between the 6th and 7th grade teams, and one here between the 7th and 8th grade teams. So the students would come up in the morning, come up that stair, and then the blue spaces that are labeled floor captain are assistant principals and some specialists. So the school psychologists, social workers are located up close to all the students and the academic wings. One thing that we heard a lot through all the programming was that the adults needed to have supervision as to where students were coming and going in and out of their pods. So the basic organization of the building is beginning to reinforce that a little bit. And then each of the teams, well, there's 2 teams per grade, but each of the teams is made up of 4 typical classrooms and a science room. And then they all have kind of an orienting point, which we're calling a learning commons. So those pink squares or pink rectangles that you see are actually learning commons. So each team has a space where they can gather and do some small project work, or there can be pullout. Specialists can come and work within a space within the team. And it really kind of gives an identity to each and every one of the teams. And then we also have each science lab there. So the basic organization of the building, I think, has really clarified itself and organized quite nicely. The architectural team has been working really closely with Henry and the landscape team to really fit the building on the site. So I'll turn it over to him and let him kind of run through the site a little bit and the logistics of that.
There we go. Good evening. Just wanted to go through a couple of the changes from the plan that you saw last time, and explain, how things have evolved a little bit. With the site plan, we originally brought in a single entrance from Indian Rock, and it came in at the entrance where the existing parent drop is. That is still the entrance for the drive that you're seeing there that Jim is highlighting. And that little half circle area is about where the parent and staff parking is today. In fact, the trees in the middle of that island would be preserved. And what we are proposing is that entrance would serve for parent drop off, and would have a long drive that would go up to the main entrance of the school that Jim was just talking about, and a little parent drop off up at that circle. That length of that drive would help to solve a lot of the queuing that currently occurs right on Indian Rock. It wraps around Orchard by just a little bit when you're, in the worst parts of it in the morning and the afternoon. And so now that could all fit on site. That also serves to provide parking to the site. We have 122 spaces. And then there are a few additional spaces over by the bus drop that would be for particularly for staff. So we have now a separate bus drop on the eastern side of the building that we're looking at that would come in from the north and be a one-way system that would exit out about halfway along to Orchard. The exit to Orchard would be a right turn only. And at both the entrance to that and the exit to that, we're proposing that there would be stop signs that would allow for a crosswalk to occur from Coach Lamp, where the children could walk safely across the street in that area. And would also mean that as the right turn exit goes onto Coach Lamp, cars would come to a stop there as well, which would help reduce the average speed on Orchard, which right now is higher than it should be and not all that super safe. And would also mean that for the right turn only for the buses, the sight distance could be accommodated to be a safe means of egress from the site. We also are looking at potentially a raised speed table coming from Ponderosa over to the existing sidewalk that runs along Indian Rock. There is currently a striped crosswalk in that area as well. We're shifting it slightly to the west so that it's away from the entrance of the radii into Ponderosa. But more importantly, it's a raised table that we're hoping, is an idea that might slow down traffic on Indian Rock, because that traffic is also traveling at a very high rate of speed compared to the curvature and the width of that road and the use of that road for the students walking. So those are a couple major changes from the plan you saw last time. We still have fields that are located in the south west side of the site. They would be basically the same fields that are there today: a softball field in the farthest southwest corner, a baseball field, and then a multi-purpose field that would overlap that. Just to the left of that, in the northwest corner of the baseball field, there's a paved play area that is about the same size as the one that currently is used by the students, that has some half basketball courts and some hopscotch and foursquare, that kind of thing. You can see the building is sited into the hill of the site, and the magenta line that Jim is pointing out right now is the existing tree line, which is the edge of the existing grassed fields in where they are today. We've been asked to provide a fire lane around the building, and so that would be what you see wrapping around the backside of the building, coming in from Orchard to the north, and then exiting back again into what essentially is the parent drive, or the general purpose parking drive to the south. The exit to the south is at 5%. We're trying to maintain that as also being a walk for students to come up the backside and get to the classroom areas that are on the backside, which would be outdoor educational spaces. Would also allow you to get to some trails in the woods on that side of the hill, which has been requested by some of the teachers. So, but it also serves the purpose, again, of being an emergency egress for fire and for just ambulances around the building. We are maintaining the two pairs of tennis courts. Those are, and the parking is situated so it'll support those. It'll support the athletic fields. We'll be screening heavily around the entire site. You have a new landscape ordinance in the town that we need to meet, and it does call for quite a heavy screening around this site. Just about everything that isn't academic or the fields will be planted, because we need to make sure that we do screen heavily around the site. Jim, you want to go back again and take a look at the elevations?
Great, thanks, Henry. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So looking at the exterior design, one of the things that we thought was really important was the siting of the building. So Henry's team and the architectural team have worked together, and by pushing the building up to the north side of those existing play fields, I think it afforded us an opportunity to really tuck the building into the slope and create or really enhance the character of the site. One of the things that we noticed was just the natural feel. There's a lot of trees, so you have greenery. There's exposed rock all over the site. And we thought it was a really nice feature to play up on a little bit. So as we design the building and try to push it back into that slope, we're trying to retain as many of the trees to the north as we possibly can. We think it's a really nice backdrop, and we're trying to introduce some character and materials that we think will fit really well. This is standing way back on the new play fields, looking north towards the new building. And we've kind of cut out a lot of the landscaping that we know is going to be a requirement as we go through. If we put in all the landscaping, you probably wouldn't be able to see the building. So for selfish reasons, we didn't show some of the plantings, but you can begin to see the massing of the building. It really fits into that slope pretty well. And I mentioned earlier that it is only a 2-story building. So the height of the gym is really the highest point of the building. Everything else, we're trying to bring the scale down quite a bit, and we're trying to introduce materials that will fit in with the site. So we have some enlarged, so this would be a view of a parent coming up that long parent drop up the driveway. You reach a point where you're looking directly at that main entry, and you can see the signage for Central Middle School. You can see the gymnasium off to the left-hand side with some glazing to get some natural light in there. And then over on the far left-hand side of this drawing, you can see how the fire lane kind of climbs up and around and comes up around the building the way Henry described it at that 5% slope. And you can see the academic pod on the far left-hand side with some windows. Moving across the elevation here, underneath the Central Middle School signage, these are the band rooms right across, and we're anticipating some sort of canopy that will provide cover for the students as they come out in the afternoon, as parents queue up and come and pick up their students. We want to provide some cover if it's a rainy day. And then over on the right-hand side where you see the larger, more vertical volume, that's the main entry to the school. So we want to announce that, and any visitor that's coming to the school, it should be really evident where that front door is. And then working over to the right would be the academic or the administrative wing. And then farther over to the right, you begin to see the 6th grade pod, which would be up beyond. We've worked really closely with the design review committee and the building committee, talking about materials and trying to introduce those natural materials so that it fits into the site really well. So right now we're looking, and this is all part of the schematic design package that's being priced by Turner. So we've been sharing these types of materials with them, and it'll be incorporated into the big picture look. Working from the left-hand side, there will be some stone veneer that we want to use as an accent. We're also anticipating some glue lamb, some timber construction in the main lobbies, so that we're bringing that wooded feel inside the building and trying to tie the architecture inside and outside the exterior. And then over on the far right-hand side, we're anticipating using some cementitious panel, which is an incredibly durable material. It's going to last the life of the building, but it comes in planks and a texture. So we're actually going to be able to explore making the building look like a wood plank building, and which I think will really help with the scale of the building and the feel of it. Moving in a little bit closer, so as a student gets out of a parent's car in the parent drop-off, they'd be at about this location. They get out the passenger side right onto the sidewalk, and then you can see the scale of that main entry as they would walk in. So you can see the verticality of the main entry in the lobby, the canopy over to the left, and then the administrative spaces on the right-hand side, which have a really good view of anybody that's coming and going from the site. And once again, we're anticipating those materials, and we've been sharing these with the design review committee. And then moving inside, alluded to the fact that we're anticipating some timber construction and some cross laminate timber in the ceilings. This will be a fairly limited application. I think you won't see it throughout the entire building, but we think there's some really high impact areas. So the main lobbies, as you come in that main entry, the main admin office is going to be over on the right-hand side of this rendering. And you can see the main lobby is a 2-story space with lots of clear story windows. So we're going to try to drive natural daylight into all these spaces. And then you can see as the students work their way down, you can see that stair at the far end of this long corridor will get the students up to the 6th and 7th grade pods up above. And then as you get into the lobby, if you turned 180 degrees, looking back at the main entry, once again, you get a sense of all the natural light that we're trying to introduce into the heart of the building, so that it's a bright, cheery space. And I think that is a real high level view. That's the presentation where it is. I'll turn it back over to Tony.
Jim, thank you. Thank you very much. So what we would like to do, Abby, do we have questions coming in?
We have 5 questions.
Oh, good, good. So what we would like to ask you to do is to go ahead, if you haven't already, to send in your questions using the QR code. Or if you would like to ask a question of us, feel free to come up to the podium and we'll take your questions live. Again, I really want to emphasize, we want to hear from you. Good, bad, or indifferent, we want to hear from you and have the feedback. And we have 2 avenues for you to do that this evening. So let's cover the questions and then we'll begin with a wrap up on next steps, where we are and how you can stay in tune with what's going on with the building committee.
Would you like me to? Okay. So the first question is, I guess it's to Jim. As owner's rep, will CSG be identifying incentives for a net zero design via federal IRA funding, Eversource grants, and other funding available to encourage net zero?
To the extent that we can, yes, we will be identifying as much as possible. But quite honestly, I think it's Thornton Tomasetti is really taking the lead through Eversource at this point to identify the incentives that are out there currently, and that could be applied to this project.
Question 2 is the intent for the new school to be 100% zero carbon based? I can take that, but I don't know if I can give it a perfect answer. The intent, one of the charges from the building committee has been for us to look at a net zero energy building. To distinguish between net zero energy, that's the operating energy of the building, and net zero carbon. I don't think it's possible to do anything with net zero carbon. Well, it is possible. Everything has some carbon footprint. What we try to do in our designs is reduce the operations energy, which reduces the carbon output of the building upon operation. We also try to reduce the carbon footprint by selecting materials that reduce the amount of carbon as opposed to another building material. So for example, the concrete that we have, that we will specify, represents a 40% reduction in carbon from typical concrete. It still has a carbon footprint, but it is a reduction because we can select the additives and the materials that go into it and replace some of the Portland cement, which is the highest guilty portion of the concrete, with something like a pozzolan glass, ground glass product. So we still maintain the integrity of the concrete and the capacity of the building structure, but we can reduce the carbon footprint in that manner. And we will do that as we look at all materials, as we select materials and put them into the building. There's a wide variety of insulations that can be chosen, some that are very high in embodied carbon and some that are lower. We'll be looking at carpets and paints and ceiling selections to make sure that the selections that we make are all reduced in amount of carbon.
And I just wanted to add the timber construction adds significantly to the reduced carbon footprint of the building in lieu of steel. It's a lighter system, so we'd be using less of the concrete. So it is a holistic approach that we're taking, SLAM is taking, and I think we're headed in a good direction.
Question 3, will the building be LEED certified or have energy efficient design? So I think I started to explain that, but LEED certification is not expected. The state of Connecticut, however, requires LEED silver equivalent of all buildings that receive any funding. So this building, the new design will in fact be LEED silver equivalent or better. SLAM typically without a net zero design intent our typical schools are usually achieving equivalency to LEED gold, which is a few credits higher. But the directive of the committee is to look into 2 designs, one that will meet Connecticut high performance standards at LEED silver equivalent, and one that will be net zero. So the next question is related. It's at what point in the design process will the energy generation systems be presented? The schematic design documents that we have produced do indicate a few options for mechanical systems in the building. Those are being evaluated now. Some are lower first cost, higher operational cost, or higher energy use. Some are higher first cost, lower energy use. And so those are all being evaluated at this time. We'll be able to present those probably early in design development to the community. They're well published to the building committee and the design review committee and the CM as we evaluate that. I'll read out loud the next question because there's a nice compliment and thank you in advance. The design looks great. Will there be opportunities for student input on recess and other spaces? When will that happen? So I'm happy to let you know that I had a great experience about a month and a half ago when Principal Healy pulled together about 80 students in a couple of different sessions, and myself and 2 colleagues were able to meet with those students and run through some design exercises. We presented the school of them. We also were able to hear them provide feedback and create their own designs. So we had a wonderful day and got a lot of feedback from the students themselves. We will continue to engage with the students as they come back to school in the fall. But we do have a recess area planned just outside of the cafeteria. And that's sort of equivalent to the blacktop that they play on now. We'll have basketball hoops and foursquare and the like. And then they'll also have access, of course, to the athletic fields. Number 6 is thank you for creating a safer campus by separating car and bus traffic. What kind of safety improvements will be made for students walking to and on campus and those who bike ride to Central? So I'll have Henry take that.
Jim, I don't know if you can pull the slide back up that shows the site plan. One of the things that we've tried to always keep in mind is that, you know, this is a school that has a lot of walkers. And so we've brought sidewalks along the sides of all the main drives coming in. We are now providing a walk that's coming from Coach Lamp back down into the site. And we've made it so that where the buses drop off and where the parents drop off, there's a shared corridor that allows students from both sides to walk into the building unimpeded. They don't have to cross traffic in, you know, coming from either direction. It also allows them to walk out to the tennis courts without crossing any kind of traffic. There is parking that's adjacent to the athletic field. So on a, you know, a Saturday or a Sunday when people are using those fields, or, you know, during the school day when the students are using the fields, you know, there's no traffic crossing those. You can get directly from those parking areas to the fields, or from the gym and the cafeteria area directly to the fields or to the playground area. So the only vehicular traffic that, you know, is involved with that at all is the emergency fire lane that's around the back of the building, and we don't see that being used. That's going to be bollarded off for emergency use only. It's not for service. It's not for, you know, access around the building other than for the fire marshal and or emergency vehicles. So really we've done our best to try to separate pedestrian traffic from vehicular traffic. I think I also mentioned that we're trying to put that the more formal crosswalks again at Coach Lamp and at Ponderosa, so that we'll slow down traffic and we'll let kids get into the school from those two areas, which are fairly large volume areas for pedestrian traffic. Oh, was it also about bicycles? Go ahead. So, right now it would be anticipated that the bikes coming up through there would just use the sidewalks. Indian Rock Lane is pretty narrow and high speed of traffic. We're hoping the speed table slows that down a little bit, but I would anticipate that that would probably be something you'd want the kids off the road for. And same thing coming down Orchard. We walked it with staff. We've been on it several times, on our own. It's not a comfortable feeling because the vehicles are coming at a pretty high rate of speed. So our whole thought is to get bikes and pedestrians off the road and bring them into the campus and let them walk through and come through that way.
So more questions are coming in. I think we're up to 13 at the moment. That was 6. So I'll continue to read those unless we have anyone would you like to come forward? Okay. Right on the.
I have to hold it. There we go. Okay. I also want to compliment you on taking all the safety into consideration. I have 2 kids who came through here, one who is visually impaired, both walkers. So this is great to see because it was kind of nerve wracking when he was at Central Middle School. I still have one at Cos Cob who will be here in a few years. I apologize if you already answered this because I came in a little late, but my recollection with the last schematic was that internally that there was going to be a media center, and I didn't really see that this time. It now looks like there's 2 or 3 learning commons. Or did I miss the media center? It's there.
Yeah, it is there. It's on the first floor.
Okay, so it's been
So
moved
it's the-
downstairs.
Yeah, it's the pink space. Yeah, and that was a conversation with the design review committee and the building committee. There was a desire to move because potentially it's a community use space.
Right.
So we did want to move it to the first floor. So we've located that with some natural light into the courtyard. And
Oh, that's
that'll be located right off the public lobby. So you can see the public entry will be here, after hours entry, which will get you into the gymnasium, the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the media center. So all off of that one main corridor.
And what's the square footage difference between what we've had in the past and what the new one will be?
Yeah, I think the overall media center, I think, was programmed at 3,200 square feet, and then it's broken down into some smaller spaces. And then we've distributed some of that square footage up into the academic pod. So those pink rectangles that you see on the second floor, we've taken some of the square footage from the overall media center and distributed it a little bit. I don't recall the exact square footage that is left on the lower level.
Do we still have to get rid of 50% of the books? Or 45? Okay, what is it? Yeah.
It's my recollection that the collection would be reduced from 15,000 to 10,000.
Thank you. I'd heard 18 to 10,000. So that's still the case, though it's being reduced. Yeah. Okay.
Just to clarify, the reductions in the collection were reviewed with Tom Healy. So as we've gone through, sorry, Claire Kilgallen, building committee member, not just some random person walking up to the microphone. Good evening. Yes, so as they've gone through this design process, when we think of who owns the building and the person who's, running it day in, day out, it's Tom Healy. So he's been hand in glove with the team. And as they've gone through these iterations and these considerations and how do we make everything fit in the Board of Ed specs, and how do we design that's been collaborated with Tom heavily, and he's sorry he can't be here this evening.
Got another person coming up. Amy.
Good evening, guys, and thank you again for all the work you're putting in here. A question, if you could go back to the schematic that shows, the whole site plan there. It looks like a lot of the traffic flow is going to be carried from Orchard, right? You have the right-hand turn in there on Orchard at the top, and then you have the exit that's also going to be a right at the bottom. I guess, has there been any consideration, and that's kind of a sharp turn at the top, which is off this page from Stanwich onto Orchard, that the bus and trucks entering the property are going to have to make. Has there been any thought to having a entrance, or if there has been, why not, an entrance on Stanwich that cuts across the property and then exits onto Orchard to keep, buses and trucks coming from the south doing that loop? And then also, it seems like for the walkers, you mentioned the pathways and sidewalks, et cetera, all seem to be on the Orchard and I guess the southern and eastern flank of the property. For the walkers that are going to be coming from Fairfield Avenue and that area, has there any thought been given to maybe a path along the western side of the fields that would connect up to the school, or an entrance from kind of the that bottom left corner there? And if not, why not? Oh, and one more question. The media center came up. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the auditorium and the size of the auditorium. I guess what is kind of, as it stands now, the size, and how does that compare to this current room that we're in right now? Thank you.
I can do the auditorium. That's an easy answer. This is 550 seats. Originally, the new one was programmed at 550. And the Board of Ed reduced it to 540. So they took 10 seats out. So it'll essentially be the same size as this auditorium.
So I'm going to try to cover as many of the site related questions as I can recall, and maybe Amy and others can help me. With regard to, we did look at access from Stanwich to Orchard. There were several major issues that had, and the main issues were that anywhere along Stanwich is really not good sight distance for anybody turning in. It's not only changing in elevation, so there are blind spots, but there's curvature, and they were uncomfortable. The staff was uncomfortable looking at any consideration, because we actually did have originally some service drives that came in there, and we were thinking about bringing that service drive and then coming back toward Orchard with that. Further, the grade change between Stanwich and Orchard is substantial. So there was no way to bring a road in there that was, we felt, a safe entrance, where, we'd have to come in at, say, 2% and then exit at 2% to be flat. So nobody was sliding into the road. That left us with a substantial pitch on the road in between the two roads. So that was sort of given up, and instead, we looked at this bus entrance and a little bit of staff parking, but the bus entrance and exit from Orchard, it's not really a main entrance. I think you sort of indicated it would be covering the main traffic, but the main traffic would still be coming, in from Indian Rock for all the parents. This is really, that loop is really only for the buses, and 9 buses serve this school, and 8 of those come from the north already. So they'd be turning in, essentially they'd be coming in along Orchard, turning in, dropping the students off, and then going back out in where they pretty much do today, only now they wouldn't necessarily have to turn on Indian Rock. They could continue on or wherever they're going. There is one bus that would have to change its route slightly to come up around that steeper turn you're talking about to the north. And the traffic engineer, Tom Wamser, did look at that. And that is an intersection that the bus can make it around and other vehicles can make it around. So, we were satisfied that still worked. Did I miss another question? It was in. Oh, on the western side of the fields. Yeah. We could certainly look at that, because quite frankly, we already have a sidewalk that leads from the play area down to some bleachers and around the backside of the main baseball field. And then there's a flat area which it's graded basically at 1.5–2% all the way to the softball field in the corner of Stanwich and Indian Rock. So we could certainly look at that. That would be another potential connection that would make some sense for a number of reasons, but access to the field included.
Amy, go ahead with questions, and if someone walks up, then we'll certainly entertain that, okay?
The next question is a statement, love the windows. That said, for windows, have you considered smart windows that automatically adjust to control temperature versus adding blinds? And I think I can speak for the group. The budget is not going to accommodate those kind of electromagnetic, I think is what they're called, electromagnetic operating windows. But we will be looking at sun shading on the exterior of the building to reduce that. We will be providing windows with a low E film on the inside. One of the panes, they will all be double pane windows with appropriate gas in between those panes. So that we're reducing the heat gain as much as possible, but using windows that are more standard in cost. It's not necessary for the windows to be hurricane graded. We've looked into that with the location of the building where it is in relation to the wind zone. However, there will be some windows that for security reasons have laminated glass. So that's a discussion that's been raised with the security committee. We've met with them once. We will meet with them again in design development and again in construction documents. Those meetings are closed door. They're not public meetings, but I will tell you that some of the windows will be laminated based on that, which happens to equal hurricane ratings. The next question is, what is the fastest way to get a shovel in the ground? Seems like there have been a lot of delays. Tony, or maybe Tim, I don't know.
Are we doing that?
Yes.
Well, first of all, it's a great question, and it's the right question to be asking. I'm going to say probably 10 days or so ago, one of our committee members asked that very question, and we decided we would pass that along to the professionals, the team that you see here, to answer that very question. What can we do to accelerate things? And there's expertise that I don't have to be able to answer that. So, Tim, you want to take a shot at it first of what the analysis showed and so forth?
Sure, I can do that. Based on the public nature of this project and the public funding that comes along with it, there is a set process that we have to follow to be able to make it through that process. Once the grant application goes in and the budget is set here in Greenwich, there is a process of a schematic design review that happens at the state level. Then we get into the design development, which SLAM will be beginning in call it about mid-August, which is about a 4-month period. And then we go to a design development review with the state as well. Following that, we get released into construction documents, which gets us another about a 4-month window as well, which gets us to a planned construction review. That PCR, it's called, releases us to go out to bid to the trades. So that process must be followed from the state level. So we're looking at opportunities to try to reduce the duration of the estimating phases that happen in between each one of those. We're also looking at opportunities on the procurement side when we go out to bid with the subcontractors to try to reduce those durations as well.
Anybody else?
Next question is, how will the size of the new auditorium compare to the current CMS auditorium? That was already answered. 540 seats in the new auditorium. The next question is, will there be outdoor space and power for a lighted flagpole and exterior signage for announcements?
So right now, under the schematic that we just provided for the initial pricing, there's actually 3 lighted flagpoles, one for the US flag, one for the state of Connecticut, and one for the school, or, you know, whatever that may change. But right now it's sort of an entrance statement, you know, a bouquet of flagpoles, if you will, at the entrance. So those would be lighted because then it allows you to leave the flags raised, and the staff don't need to bring them down every night, and for night events, that's nice. And what was the second part of that question?
Exterior signage and announcements.
Oh, yeah, so that's something we haven't gotten into. There certainly will be, you know, identification signage, main identification signage for the school that would of course be lit, because a lot of functions go on at the school at night. But if you're talking about specifically one that has information and is an electronic sign, that hasn't been formally agreed upon or discussed, that's something we'd have to cross.
You're going to keep going, Henry. The next question is, how many trees will be removed for construction?
It's a moving target. We're trying to minimize the number because under the regulations, we're supposed to put back a similar caliper at DBH of 4 feet. So we're trying to minimize that because that adds cost to the project. And we also, you know, walked with the tree warden, and there are trees that we're trying to save for just this aesthetic reasons as well. It's a very pretty old site. It has some nice full growth on it. So wherever we can, we're trying to minimize that. The grading plan we've done recognizes that. But the reality is that there, you know, are new improvements, including fields that are graded out at 2%. So, you know, and new parking and new access to Orchard, and site distances that have to be respected regardless of whether the old ones were in place or not. So, you know, we're studying all of that. You also have a new landscape regulation that, to a degree, I hate to use this word, but we're going to be a little bit of guinea pigs for, because it's brand new. And so, you know, we'll be required to screen quite a bit of this site. And so there'll be quite a bit of landscaping that goes into this project. Again, as Jim pointed out, those views you saw of the building were really primarily to see what the elevation of the building looked like. If you in fact showed that there was a bosque of trees at that parent drop off, you know, it would obscure the view. You'll be looking underneath those. We're seeing, you know, something like amelanchiers in that location. And we're working again with the tree warden. All the trees will be native or adaptive species. We're trying to make sure that they're trees that can take a minimum of maintenance, that they're trees that grow in this area. They can grow as understory to the very large oaks and the other trees that are in the area. You can see, even on, if you walk the site, that there are a lot of little miniature hollies, and that's one of the trees that he felt was, you know, a good screening material that will grow as an understory and survive. So those are more details than I probably Tony wants me to get into because of the timer constraints. But the bottom line is we're going to be screening quite a bit with landscaping, and we're going to be preserving as much of those existing trees as we can.
Given the time, let's take one more question. And if any last call for if anyone in the room has a question, if you will, come up to the podium. Amy, go ahead with your question, and then we'll take his shortly.
Okay. So the next question is, will there be student engagement when identifying furniture in the space? How much current student input will you take into consideration in the design? Their perspective is valuable. So I agree. I mentioned that we did meet with the students already. We will be happy to meet with the students again. This is something that is really a part of the design process that we enjoy, and that's who we're building the school for. We also work with furniture vendors regularly, and so a typical process is that the furniture is designed separate from this process of building design. Partway through the construction, we will start the furniture design process. You can't start it too early because furniture gets discontinued, as I'm sure you're familiar with in your own homes. And so we want to design it as near to the installation as possible, but still give ourselves enough time for that state process and overview that we will go through for the furniture phase as well. Furniture vendors are happy to provide samples, and we often can get a full mock-up of a classroom sample because the furniture vendors are interested in sharing their latest designs. So that's something that we expect will be able to accommodate in this process. And so we'll get the student feedback at that time.
Quick question for Turner. When and where was the last middle school that you guys built in Fairfield County?
The last middle school would have been. I'm trying to think. Up to that, yeah. Well, we've done several of the, Greenwich Country Day School, Brunswick. I'm trying to think of the last middle school in Fairfield County. I can get back to you with that answer.
All right, and when you get back, I'm surprised you don't know, but anyway, because it's a pretty big project, I would imagine. But if you can, when you get back, let us know the district, when, and the approximate size of the school itself. Was it 400 kids, 500 kids, 600 kids? And if you can, get us the cost.
Thank you. Let's go as we wrap up. Let's go to the next slide. Jim, I think there's another one. What we are going to do with your questions from tonight, and Amy, we still have some that are unanswered, correct? We will be answering all of your questions and putting them on the Greenwich Public Schools website. There's specifically a Central Middle School link. And there you can find all of our building all of our building committee agendas for our meetings. You can see minutes there, and we will be sure to post the answers to the questions on the website as well. And if you do have any questions that you didn't want to ask or send in via the QR code and you put them on an index card, make sure that you leave those at the front table on the way out so we can be sure to add those as well. I want to close with this comment and let you know exactly where we are right now. And you've heard a couple of references to cost. We have the professionals now working on a revised project cost estimate based on the schematic design documents. The schematic design documents were completed by SLAM on June 30th. And then we have Turner Construction and SLAM going down the path of coming up with a project cost estimate separately, so that then we can compare the two numbers, work out any differences, and then decide in conjunction with the Board of Education where we go from there. And I do want to thank Joe Kelly, the Board of Education, for slipping in the back and keeping an eye on things. Thank you, Joe. One other thing that I would add, and that is we are at the very, very beginning of what is known as the municipal improvement process. The very first step in that is next Tuesday at 4 o'clock with the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you know, those meetings are the link to those meetings, which are public, is also posted, I think, on the town government website. Okay. So if you would like to stay in touch or stay informed rather about where we are in the municipal improvement approval process, again, that starts Tuesday and will go on for several months. And then lastly, email us. You can see the email on your screen. I think it's also on your QR code piece of paper as well. I'll close by saying we want to hear from you. So send us an email, ask a question, and we'll do our very best to get back to you in a timely manner. We're all volunteers. We're giving it a lot of time. So when you send in a question, give us a little time, but we will come back. Okay, who's going to move? We adjourn. Okay, and is there a second? Laura Costin seconds. We're adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. remember to ask questions of your building committee members, the 4 people on the front row. But you should bend their ear and ask questions of them, make suggestions, whatever, as we all exit. So thank you.
And thanks from the Zoom.
Thank you.